All right, so as this article out of Fox Business says, Disney Fox merger can cause thousands of layoffs. And as the article goes into, Walt Disney Company, or corporation, which completed its $71 billion acquisition of 21st Century Fox's entertainment assets on Wednesday, is expected to lay off thousands of employees to achieve a cost-cutting goal of some $2 billion, according to a published report. Now let's look at this for a second. Before I get further into this, I want to mention that we're talking about, again, conglomerizing or bringing everything down to lesser and lesser companies in the mainstream media. These massive conglomerates are already big enough. Very few companies own basically most of the mainstream media. This is why independent media is so important, guys. But it's all being shoved into these few companies, and it's concerning to say the least. This is kind of corporatism, and this is kind of the push by government as well to monopolize information into smaller categories, as all these major mainstream medias lose massive amounts of viewership as well. And it's creating a massive issue here because we have very few places to find our information. Then you go to Google and YouTube, and they're just propping up all the mainstream medias on there because they know everyone's leaving the mainstream medias and going to independent medias. Anyway, I'm going to go on here in this story. As part of the acquisition of Fox assets, Burbank, California-based Disney is taking on about 15,400 Fox employees, while Fox Corporation will keep about 7,000. To reach Disney's promised target of $2 billion in cost savings by 2021, about 3,000 employees are expected to be laid off, the Los Angeles Times reported. Some of those cuts are expected to take place in overlapping divisions like marketing, distribution, and home entertainment. Although a small number of layoffs could start as soon as this week, the Times reported, citing anonymous sources, the bulk of the cuts will likely not occur for weeks or even months. Some of those cuts are expected to take place in overlapping divisions like marketing, distribution, and home entertainment. Although a small number of layoffs could start as soon as this week, the Times reported, citing anonymous sources. The bulk of the cuts will likely not occur for weeks or even months. Disney did not immediately respond to a request for comment. In a note to employees on Wednesday, Disney CEO Bob Iger wrote that after executives at both companies spent the year studying how to integrate the companies, there are still challenges ahead in doing so. And I quote, "I wish I could tell you that the hardest part is behind us, that closing the deal was the finish line, rather than just the next milestone," he wrote in a letter obtained by CNBC. "Our integration process will be an evolution, with some businesses impacted more than others," Eager added. "We've made many critical decisions already, but some areas still require further evaluation. We may not have answers to all of your questions at this moment, but we understand how vital information is, and we're committed to moving as quickly as possible to provide clarity regarding how your role may be impacted." In the deal, Disney acquired Fox's film and TV studios, majority ownership in video streaming services, Hulu, a stake in UK pay TV company Sky, and cable networks FX and National Geographic. 21st Century Fox is a former parent company of Fox Business and Fox News, which this article is out of. So I want to also mention that there's a lot to be said about the fact that a lot of these companies are involved in financialization, and as John Snyson here at WHAM has gone over many times, this has become a very real problem, especially as the markets are being so propped up and so bubbled. There's such a huge risk of a massive crash on the near horizon, and I mean, that's what happens when you manipulate and centralize an economy and prop up a system to an extent where the more you prop it up, the worse it's going to come down, and they keep pushing it off longer and longer, kind of like pushing a beach ball out of water in a lot of cases, underwater in a lot of cases. So, but I want to also mention, like, we're getting to a point where all these companies are facing potential bankruptcy in the near future, and they are trying their best, much like a lot of the bankrupt banks around the world are trying to do by merging. They're trying to, save themselves for a little bit longer. They're trying to save themselves from the inevitable, which is going to happen eventually as people move away from mainstream media en masse to the internet, as we've seen for years. Their viewership on these channels is brutal. And I mean, look, I'm a huge fan of The Simpsons, for example. Huge fan. Old Simpsons episodes. New episodes, oh man, it's so horrible. And now Disney owns The Simpsons. I mean, again, 21st Century Fox has been around for a long time. Fox has been around since 1920s, possibly late 19. I think 1920s. They did some silent movies back in the day. Their former founder was actually imprisoned for a while in, I believe, the 30s. I'm just going back in history a little bit here from memory. And then Disney, of course, has been around since the 20s. And these companies merging after all this time it's a huge story. It's one of the biggest mergers I can remember in recent times. And honestly, they're just trying to save themselves. And as people move, like I mentioned, over to the internet from these massive conglomerates, they're on damage control. They're freaking out. They're trying to do whatever they can to save themselves. They're pushing places like YouTube and Google to push all their videos to the top. You go to a lot of these stories. We've done videos that are much bigger than Fox News, much bigger than CNN, much bigger than BBC, Al Jazeera, all these stations. And what happens? You search up these issues on Google, and Al Jazeera and Fox News and CNN and all these, ABC and NBC, they all get pushed to the top. They're all the top stories in the search, even though they have so many less views than our video on the same subject, because they are getting to a point where they're like, we must save ourselves from the inevitability of people decentralizing information more and more over time and moving away from us because they don't like us anymore, because they don't trust us anymore, because we've been involved in government propaganda campaigns for years. We make up nonsense stories. No one really suffers when it comes down to it. They make terrible stories up. And then, they promote violence against children, like we've seen, for example, recently in the Covington scandal. And they jump to conclusions. They love fear. They love the idea of scaring people into subservience. We tell stories that are scary, but we give people solutions because we want people to break free from that system so they don't have to be afraid of anything. So, again, we have this huge revolution happening, this evolution, I guess you could say, where people are moving away from this system. And what happens? They're like, well, what can we do? We can basically get everyone shadow banned on YouTube. We can merge companies like Deutsche Bank is trying to do with Commerzbank and everything as they move down to a small lender as they're bankrupt. And we can, look at the vast loss in viewership over the years for Fox and CNN and these companies, which used to get like 75 million people in a night in viewership. Now they're lucky if they get a few million. It's brutal how much they're failing right now, and they know it, and they know that they are losing the information war, and for that reason, here we go, financialization and mergers. And all while the stock market suffers, and a lot of their stocks are looking at very real dips in the near future, which, they could recover long term, however they try to innovate their own companies. But overall, they're basically doomed. And a lot of these employees are doomed too. And I feel bad for a lot of these employees, even though they're working for terrible conglomerates that are completely pushing people into subservience to banks and governments and misleading people and stupefying people and propagandizing and indoctrinating. It's like a new version of public school for adults where people just regurgitate talking points, whatever they hear. But I still, most of these people don't even realize what they're doing. And a lot of them aren't involved in that aspect. They just got desk jobs doing little things or, nothing that really is involved in propagating everyone. I mean, my point is, I feel bad for some of these people. But the mainstream media's time is coming to an end. People are moving to independent media, and that's just the way it is. So they're trying to shadow ban us. They're trying to cut us from being seen. Where they're trying to, we've lost so much of our viewership lately. We're barely reaching our 115,000 subscribers on YouTube. In some cases, we're only reaching like 1% of our audience, which is ridiculous, and people who click to be notified aren't notified anymore. Again, this is just another issue of Google and all these massive conglomerate corporations all working together to try and force a monopoly on information into a few categories where we have, mainstream media is getting away with whatever. I mean, CNN posts videos of a guy eating a human being, cannibalism, as part of a news report, and that's okay and it's monetized. But you post a video about the economy, and they demonetize it as hate speech, and then age restricted, and then stop people from seeing it because it's inappropriate. It's not advertiser friendly. I mean, it's ridiculous, and that's only just part of it. Anyway, it's getting really bad, folks. But I'm optimistic. I think we are heading in the right direction to replace these behemoths, and that's why they're getting desperate. Only a desperate person would do these kinds of things, the things that they're doing. They're desperate because they know their time is limited, and they're trying to utilize and make the best of it. So anyway, thanks for joining us, and until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Like what you see here, WAM? Don't forget to check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so heavily demonetized and censored by YouTube, as these guys come in and flag all of our content as hate speech. The shadow banning is getting really bad, guys. Also, check our Bitcoin address right here on the screen or in the description below. We really appreciate it. And of course, check us out at the Red Pill Expo 2019. Of course, the great G. Edward Griffin and so many other incredible speakers will be there. Our link for that is below as well. And we cannot forget Mike Maloney's goldsilver.com, which you can also find in the description. One of the greatest market and monetary historians out there. We really encourage everyone to check that out. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
I'm sure you have already changed people's minds in your young age because you're involved, and I like that.
Thank you.